Well, that's exactly what you do because you are a part of the MAGA cult.
What you are about to see is a total collision between two completely different realities. On one side, we have a Newsmax host, a typical voice in the billionaire-backed, far-right media machine trying to steamroll a guest with the usual MAGA talking points and war hawk rhetoric. On the other, we have Professor Mohammad Marandi, an Iranian scholar who refuses to follow the script. This isn't just a heated interview. It is a surgical dismantling of the propaganda used to justify interventionism and the erosion of international law. While the host tries to frame every act of resistance as regime-sponsored terror, Marandi hits back with the receipts, forcing a reckoning with the human cost of illegal occupations and the staggering hypocrisy of a media establishment that chooses which dead children are worth mourning. It's an explosive moment that shows exactly what happens when the far-right's common sense narrative is pressure-tested by someone who actually knows the history and the law. If you are new here, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel. I'll give you my thoughts at the end after the clip.
Media advisor to the Iranian regime's nuclear negotiating team. He lives in Tehran and is a de facto spokesman for the regime and joins us now. And, sir, thank you. I want to start with, after 2.5 weeks, the Trump administration says that the Iranian regime has been effectively decimated, in his opinion. Want to get your reaction to that?
Well, I'm not a spokesman for the administration, but obviously the Trump regime is putting out propaganda, and we are seeing Iranian missiles and drones being fired in retaliation for this illegal assault on Iranian sovereignty. And as Joe Kent pointed out, this war was carried out based on a lie. There was no threat from Iran. And of course, it was carried out because of pressure from the Israeli lobby and the Israeli regime itself. So it is not legitimate, and that is why Iran feels that it has to defend itself, and it is doing so quite effectively.
But between Iran and the proxies that you guys prop up throughout the Middle East, you have attacked a number of U.S. interests, including our men and women in service. You've killed Americans. You killed more than 40 Americans. Hamas killed more than 40 on October 7th that launched the war in Gaza. To say that Iran is not a threat to the United States, I don't buy that. Why do you make that claim?
Well, I don't think it's necessary for you to buy it. These are the facts. The United States occupied Afghanistan.
What about everything I just said?
It wasn't. Well, I'm responding.
Okay.
The United States occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. The United States illegally occupied Iraq. So when the Iraqi people resist, you cannot blame the United States. When the people of Afghanistan resist occupation, you cannot blame the Iranians. You have to blame the United States, whether in Iraq or in Afghanistan. That's the problem of the regime in Washington, not Iran's problem. If Iran entered U.S. territory and occupied it, you'd have the legitimate right to defend yourself. And so do the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. You can't blame a third party for the resistance of people against occupation.
You don't deny that your regime props up international terrorism through multiple different facets, do you?
Your regime does that. ISIS was created by your regime. Al-Qaeda was created by your regime. Al-Qaeda, the head of Al-Qaeda,
Hezbollah.
The Al-Qaeda head went to the White House. That's the same organization that you tell us carried out 9/11. So how are we supposed to figure out who's a terrorist in this world with your standards?
I want to ask you this. Protests in your country are expected to ramp up as we head into the Persian New Year, which is this weekend. Do you believe, and I know you don't represent the regime directly, but do you think that the regime is going to murder thousands more innocent people in the streets of Tehran and your country?
The only regime that is murdering thousands of people is your regime. You're bombing our people. You're slaughtering kids. And then your regime...
We have videos of your forces killing innocent people in the streets. There's bodies everywhere. We have video of that. That's undeniable.
No, your regime bombed an elementary school, murdered 168 little girls, and your regime tried to pin the blame on Iran. And your fake news about Iran killing tens of thousands of protesters has the same amount of accuracy and legitimacy and honesty as your presidents, the head of your regimes, claimed that Iran fired missiles at the school.
You're saying that your forces inside the country didn't kill thousands of people that tried to stand up to the regime, as they have done so many times in the past. You're saying that's a complete fabrication.
That is your regime propaganda, absolutely. 300 officers of the law, 200 policemen and 100 others were murdered by the terrorists that were armed by your regime. Go and look at channel 14 of Israeli TV, which is close to Netanyahu. They said that the arms were brought in by a foreign intelligence agency, meaning the US and the Israelis, that killed hundreds of police officers. One woman in your country was turning to the right and you shot her in the face. And you say that's legitimate. But in Iran, they killed hundreds of police officers. And you want to pin the blame on the police? 3,117 people were killed. All of them have the ID. They've all been identified and named. And agents from abroad armed people who are responsible for these deaths. You cannot blame Iran for something that your regime carried out.
We know, everybody knows that you don't believe any of the things that you're saying. I mean, it's obvious there. Is it hard to continue propagandizing for this regime? I know you don't care what I think. I mean, I understand that, but it's like saying the sky is red. The sky is not red.
Well, that's exactly what you do, because you are a part of the MAGA cult. It's a cult for you. Joe Kent, he's not
your hero, Joe Kent.
I didn't put him in power.
Yeah.
Joe Kent, I didn't put him in power. No. Your president did. He is saying exactly what I just told you. So if I don't believe what I say, then obviously he doesn't believe what he says.
He said a very, very small fraction of what you just claimed, which is quite a bit of things. Let me ask you this:
you just told me that I don't believe. You just told me I don't believe a word of what I said.
I know you don't.
That is part of what I said. So you're contradicting yourself now.
Well, no, I just know. I know BS, and I know propaganda. I know what it looks like. I know your country is professional at that. You guys are pros.
I'm sure you know BS because that's your job.
Well, you've blacked out the internet in your country. You don't allow media to report on anything, and you're going to sit here and tell me that you're
assassinating people using the internet. You use the internet to assassinate people. So we have the internet for people inside Iran, for Iranian apps, Iranian websites. But since your government, your regime, which is working with the Israeli regime to kill Iranian people, what percentage of the people in your country support the regime at this point, your estimation? The overwhelming majority on the streets every night. They're on the streets and demanding that the armed forces retaliate. Your propaganda, your regime propaganda, is deceiving a segment of American society. But the reality is getting through to the international community. People across the world are seeing what your regime is doing to my people, the murder that your regime is carrying out, and history will remember the role that each person played. Everything that I said is true, but everything that you say is Trump regime propaganda.
This wasn't just an interview. It was a car crash for the Newsmax propaganda machine. Let's break down exactly why this exchange matters for anyone who cares about democratic accountability and the truth. The occupation trap. Marandi starts by doing something the right-wing media ecosystem finds unforgivable. He cites international law. He points out that the Trump regime's narrative of terrorism conveniently ignores the reality of illegal occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. When people resist an invading force, that isn't regime-sponsored terror, it's a response to a violation of sovereignty. The host had zero answer for this because the far-right playbook relies on erasing history to justify the next conflict. The receipts on extremism. One of the hardest-hitting moments was Marandi calling out the hypocrisy of the US foreign policy establishment. He reminds the viewer that the leadership of Al-Qaeda, the very group blamed for 9/11, has been received at the White House when it suited Western strategic interests. This exposes the billionaire-driven culture war for what it is, a tool to keep ordinary workers focused on manufactured enemies, while the people in power play games with global stability. The media's moral blind spot. Perhaps the most damning part of the clip is the mention of the elementary school bombing that killed 168 little girls. Notice how the host immediately pivots to talking about internet restrictions. This is a classic tactic used by reactionary media like GB News and Newsmax. When faced with a moral catastrophe caused by their own side's policies, they change the subject to freedom of speech or censorship to avoid talking about the dead children their rhetoric helped bury. The MAGA cult label, Marandi doesn't hold back, calling the host a member of a cult that prioritizes talking points over facts. He even uses the host's own side against him, citing Joe Kent, a Republican often aligned with the MAGA movement, to show that even within their own ranks, the narrative that this war serves national security is falling apart. This clip shows us that the same tactics used to manufacture consent for war are the ones used to attack our public institutions and workers' rights at home. They rely on division, the erasure of facts, and the hope that you won't look too closely at the receipts. But, as Marandi said, history remembers. If you made it to the end, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next one.